All right, we should be live. Let's see, video. There we go. Hey, I am Zach.
Hello, and I'm Steve, and you are listening to With Thunderous podcast. Guys, we're two friends with differing points of view, discuss current events and the state of the world on various topics. Like today, I believe we're talking about energy economics and specifically peak oil.
Indeed, we are. One of the videos we'll be watching further clarifies peak cheap oil. I don't know if there's a difference or not, but we'll find out, I guess.
Oh, there is.
Well, then I guess we're going to talk about that. You are in the red right now. Dang it.
Sure.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and get started on our first video to give your computer a chance to catch up.
Look, let's. I know everyone's focused on this war in Ukraine, but there is a consequence of ignoring some of the, domestic issues. And one of the consequences of this war that's happening in Ukraine and the sanctions that are being put on Russia is that gas prices are rising up. Mm-hmm. This is a fact. And in some parts of the country, it's $6, $7 a gallon. Here in Illinois, especially in Chicago, dare I say it's getting close now, or on par with being $5 a gallon. And in this struggling economy, you have Americans working 2 or 3 jobs, if they're lucky to have 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet, and that's still not enough. So now the Democrats, in their infinite wisdom, are now trying to figure out how, in many ways, they could lower the gas prices, or either figure out ways to do something. So when we covered on yesterday's show, there was the fact that the Biden-Harris administration were going to places like Venezuela, Iran, saying, hey, you guys, you got any of that oil? Got any of that oil? We want some of that good stuff, you know? We always thought you guys were cool. But anyways, looking at it, Democrats are looking for ways to lower gas prices, which have skyrocketed in the wake of Russia's invasion of the Ukraine. It could rise further as the U.S. and other countries move to ban Russian imports. And as we've covered on the show, Russia is a large exporter of oil. They've got a lot of natural resources, and the United States consumes a lot of that oil.
Isn't it funny that, all this time, we've been saying on the show and a lot of other shows and a lot of people have been saying, hey, maybe we should move to renewable energy. It might make us less dependent on, foreign fossil fuels. And everyone's like, nah, it's fine. We'll just dig up more tar sands and use that, and then we'll export that. And now it's an issue.
Mm-hmm. And
crazy. It's almost like we could see it coming.
Yeah, well, it's like we all saw it coming, and now here it is. Here we are right now, and the United States and the American consumer are right now struggling. So Democrats believe they have some political cover because of the bipartisan backlash to Russia. President Biden made the point of blaming Russian President Vladimir Putin for the increase, calling it Putin's price hike. Now, the thing is, on the one hand, okay, I see your point, Biden, but on the other hand, previous Democratic and Republican presidential administrations led us down this route to where we are dependent on foreign oil. So let's ignore the Biden-Harris administration. Let's look at the Trump administration, the Obama administration, Bush Jr. administration, Bill Clinton's administration, Bush Sr., and going all the way back even to Ronnie Boy Reagan. Those Republican and Democratic presidential administrations led us down this route to where we are dependent on the drug of foreign oil. It's not just Putin. And I get it. Yes, Putin does have some blame to it, but the American presidents, both Democrat and Republican, did this to us. They're the ones that led us down this road.
And isn't it just fascinating? I saw people mentioning this in chat as well, but isn't it just fascinating that there's a war and all of a sudden oil immediately jumps price, even though the supply chain takes a while for oil to move through. So there's oil actually, still moving towards the U.S. So just amazing that prices moved as quickly as they did. It's almost as if a deregulated market is taking advantage of the chaos of the situation to inject their own price increases that they can then mask as being behind the war.
Yeah, I can't remember if it was this video or another one, but I got a kick out of it. When he's like, no, I don't want that new oil that costs money. Give me the old oil that's like $4 a gallon. I'll take some of that. I don't mind. You're muted, by the way.
Appreciate that. I muted myself because I started to chuckle during it, and I was like, I should probably mute myself.
No, good call.
No, but it was just funny because it was like, what's his name? The Dave Chappelle character. I think it's like
Tyrone Biggums.
Tyrone Biggins. Yeah, he's like, oh, how about some of that oil? Talking about it, and it's just what I like about that. I mean, I know this is beyond the scope of what we're talking about, but like, it's just so transparently self-serving. Like, Venezuela, they're evil. Maduro's an evil dictator, and so forth. Until it's like, well, he's an evil dictator because he doesn't want to liberalize and privatize the Venezuelan oil industry. But like, we don't care if it's state owned if we need that oil. So like, we were kind of in a position where we could posture with and lie and attempt to coup and punish the Venezuelan people with sanctions, and punish not even just the Venezuelan people, but attempt to stomp out a little ember of revolutionary energy.
Yeah,
because like the Chavista movement is still pretty robust as far as I know. And so anyway, it's just so transparently self-serving. The US government's just like, okay, well, now we have this other enemy, so you're our friend now. And there's no like ideological consistency. It's purely about the resources.
Oh yeah, it's got nothing to do with anything but
Venezuela
and what they
wouldn't
can do
have
for
been
us.
Enemy number one for whatever the last many years and beyond, if they had just like privatized their oil industry, right? Like, they would have never. They're only an enemy because they want like democratic control over their nation's resources. It's insane.
It's a wild concept, having the resources of the country being owned by the people and controlled by the people. It's so foreign to me.
Right. I mean, I've always thought too, like, if California really wanted to like shift into gear, California should just do what Alaska did and just be able to provide a dividend. Cause like there's the Monterey Shale formation is like barely explored. And here's the thing, like, it's funny because like as a eco-socialist or whatever, I'm like, we need to not pump that. But ultimately, like, there's no political future in telling people they can't drive to Walmart or Target or Trader Joe's or whatever, right? Like, there's no political future in being a truth teller about the fact that like there is no green solution to an industrial economy that has built its infrastructure around the availability of cheap fossil fuels for the last 100 years. So the next best thing we can do in the context of like a highly suburbanized is like transition. And how do we transition? Well, you control the resource so that you can raise prices or institute a carbon tax or whatever, and then use the dividend, like the profit from oil, to then redistribute that and then let people decide how they want to transition their lives. They can continue to pay for fossil fuel and use that money on a boat or whatever, right? The dividend, it's just their money to do with whatever they want. Or they can get a more efficient vehicle, or they can buy some land somewhere, or they can, set themselves up as self-employed so they don't have to commute or whatever else. I definitely think that democratic control, if not state control, of an industry as critical as energy is like, we're just stupid. Americans are stupid.
I'm just honestly surprised that more isn't being done about it, because like I can't imagine if a big hot city lost its air conditioning for a period of days in the middle of summer. Like, at that point there's no escaping the heat. You might as well march down and form an angry mob and start destroying some city-owned stuff until you get your power back. Like, it's in the best interest of the controlling powers to make sure that we can transition over and keep having all of the luxuries that we want as much as possible. Obviously some things you can't, but like to me it just doesn't make any sense that they're not are putting more effort into helping people maintain what they've become accustomed to before it turns into an emergency and people get wicked pissed, as it were.
Well, speaking of emergencies, it's been called the long emergency by one author who's written a lot about the subject of how energy intense like suburbanization was. Like it's kind of like a urban planner kind of thinker, like built environment kind of person. Yeah, and he calls it the long emergency because the reality is that there is no alternative to fossil fuels in the context of an industrial society and the luxuries that's provided a small portion of the population, right? If you live in sub-Saharan Africa or like some village in Latin America or whatever, like you don't benefit from the work that energy provides. And that's ultimately like how we need to start thinking of fossil fuels, not like, oh, we burn too much gasoline, because like transportation is a significant portion of our energy budget. I don't think we pulled up any of the stats, like either the climate greenhouse gas inventory stats or anything like that. But transportation is, I believe, like around a 25%.
The video I was watching said 40.
Oh, is it closer to 40?
Yeah, closer to 40.
Yeah, but like residential and commercial heat and industrial processes, no, they're significant, man. And still, like when you say transportation, ultimately there's flaws in collecting that data that like they're counting like they're not counting they're counting like tailpipe emissions, right? They're not counting like the asphalt it takes to pave roads.
Okay, it's not being clumped in there.
No. The machines that fix roads would be industrial output, and that's where their greenhouse gas emissions might get measured. But that machine doesn't exist except to pave road.
Yeah, which is needed like, for transportation.
Part of the transportation sector.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's all sorts of fuzzy accounting and stuff. And ultimately, like, there are better alternatives to what we have. I was talking to someone about public transit, and that's a whole show in and of itself. But, like, we just don't have it here. And we could, right? Like, we could totally... I mean, I think even last episode, we talked about high-speed rail and shit.
Oh, we did, yes.
Yeah, like, there are better alternatives in bus systems, of more efficient bus systems. I could totally see, like, fleets of vans that are electric rather than, like, these natural gas buses that, like, are never full.
Natural gas buses are just taking advantage of like what America has. That's part of the energy independence conversation. Is, you know, we basically lumped together like coal, natural gas, and all this other stuff, and said America's energy independent now, but like we don't have a lot of crude oil necessary to make gasoline, but we have a shit ton of natural gas and coal. And so of course we're like, well, what can we use this on? Okay, let's make these vehicles that run off natural gas. Are they efficient? Not great, but you know,
better than diesel.
Yeah, but it uses what we got, so let's just do that. You know, when you got a hammer, everything's a nail.
Yeah, but the thing is that as far as like the conversation about oil dependency and transitioning the suburbs, like public transit has to be rethought. It can't be a bus that seats 80 people that comes by once an hour, or no one will use it. Like, we need to have hubs that connect to light rail, and then all of the bus system is just a bunch of passenger vans, like electric passenger vans.
Yeah, just make it like, you know, the last mile when it comes to transporting goods and stuff. Most of the stuff is done by rail, and then, you know, for the last bit, it's taken by truck to the stores for distribution. You just need to do the same thing for the transportation or mass transit sector, where
exactly
a whole bunch of little nimble vehicles that can interchange with each other so that you don't have gaps in a service.
Right. Yeah. And then you have a small transit hub where there's a place to stop a van. It'll go out of service every few hours to charge for an hour or whatever. And you just have a fleet of them, and they come by every 15 minutes or every 20 minutes instead of once an hour. And now, like, you can walk out to your street or up the block jump in a van every 15 minutes that comes by. Pardon me, and then that'll connect you to a little transit hub where you get on an express bus.
Mm-hmm.
And there's an express bus that'll meet you there every 15 minutes. And now you have one that's doing the long run.
Yeah, for
every
longer
15
distances.
minutes rather than doing these like super, like in where I live, man, the bus is like an hour and 10-minute loop. So if you have to get on in one part, like, and you're trying to get to the transit center, but you got on the loop that goes the long way, like, you could be on the bus for 50 minutes to go like 2 miles, 3 miles.
Oof.
And it's
I don't know that it's much better here. I know that it has a bigger presence, but I suspect that's only due to a larger population.
Yeah, I think the population of where you're at is like
it's about 5 times bigger.
5 times.
Yeah, somewhere in there. Yeah.
But it's also like in terms of land area, I think it's like 3 times.
Very spread out. This town is ridiculous. Yeah,
it's basically like the Houston of the West Coast. It's just fucking hideous.
That's a good.
It's fucking hot. There's no fucking trees. It's all pavement and parking lots.
It's
a shitty place to live, bro. It's a shitty place.
No, it is. It is so obvious, like how bad all the pavement is for everything. Because like on my way to work on a nice cool morning, I'll pass by 2 unpaved, relatively large, just like plots of land where nobody built anything for whatever reason. And they are the only places that have fog on the entire trip because they're the only places that are unpaved where the ground can suck in some moisture and then be able to re-release
transpiring.
it. Yeah, exactly.
And then on a cool night, that transpiration, then it gets heavy and settles and condensates.
Yep.
Yeah, bro. Like, it's fucking remarkable. The whole like decision to pave everything, man. And there's like when we go get sandwiches here in Chico, like there's that whole parking area where the deli is.
Oh, Spiteri's.
Like, yeah, dude.
Yeah, that's a horrible place.
Spiteri's is good. They need to just like the city just needs to come in and mandate that parking lot's fucked off. There's gigantic potholes and shit. It's not maintained.
Yeah.
They just need to come in and be like, all right, like this whole, we're going to put a big middle tree island so that all that water, instead of going into a storm drain, has a place to infiltrate. And we're going to put some native oak trees that'll attract wildlife and maybe some native shrubs like some, ceanothus or some buckwheat or something like that to attract insects. And we'll put a park bench, but then people around here, and this will be our subject next week when we have more time to prepare better clips. We're going to talk about houselessness. But that's ultimately why they don't do it. They're like, what do you mean reduce urban heat island? Like, you're going to take my property and give it to hobos. Because if you put a tree there, then that's where hobos
somebody's going to want to sit underneath that tree so they don't bake their brain in 110-degree weather.
Basic dignity in our habitat, like our lived environment, because we're afraid that someone else might benefit it. Mm-hmm. And in our mind, they don't deserve it. It's fucked.
Yeah.
But we'll get to that next week. Do you want to play another clip? I heard you queued up some Chris Martinson.
I do. I've got one more from Hardeland's Media.
Yeah, let's
I think it bears watching. Yeah,
these guys are great, man.
That's a little bit shorter. Before. Yeah, I have not watched anything other than this one, but I do like their interactions. Unfortunately, for time, I had to cut around some of their interactions.
But and also that's not really relevant, right? Like, so what we're trying to do, but also like, I take some of my aesthetic from them. Like, I don't worry about like my fucking hair's all fucked up. My beard's like, I trimmed it too short on this side. It's still bushy on this side, or I'm wearing a fucking t-shirt because I've been out in the yard working all day. And I'm like, hey, dude, Hardlands does it.
I shaved right before this, and I try to wear a different shirt if I have it every week. I don't know if I've been consistent or not. Yeah. Do you recognize this?
I don't.
This was worn at your wedding.
Oh, excellent.
I still have the
Which one?
Too.
No,
I think it was the third one.
No, but yeah, anyway, I like these guys. Go ahead and roll the next one, bro.
Will do.
Democrats are acutely aware that the same Republicans who have been clamoring for the Biden administration to ban Russian oil will turn around and attack them if fuel prices rise. Well, no duh. Is the sky blue? Is water wet? These are facts. Now, Senate Republicans signaled that they view gas prices as a crucial line of attack heading into the midterms, where they could win back control of Congress. They also go on to state, I expect our Democratic friends will now try to blame the entire increase in prices on our efforts to punish Russia. But don't be fooled, said Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, Turtle Boy Mitch. This was more than a year in the making, which actually, I hate to agree with him. He is kind of sort of right. But remember, these are Democratic and Republican politicians who play the screw around games. They might signal some truths here and there, but there's always a bigger agenda. And no matter how the midterms will play out, whether it's the Democrats who win or Republicans will win, nothing will fundamentally change. And you, the consumer, are still struggling. Don't freak out. It's not over yet.
Well, and the other piece of it is Mitch McConnell is strategically in place such that these sorts of things and a complete stranglehold on any policy to actually move forward is created. So, I mean, it's all really created like by design in that way.
Now, the thing is, gas prices were already on the rise before Russia's invasion, but Democrats are galvanizing.
It's all Putin. Say that.
Oh, right. I'm sorry. But no, this is a fact.
What?
They were on the rise already. And the thing is, Democrats are now galvanizing on bipartisan backlash to Putin's invasion to try to put the blame on the entire price hike squarely on the Russian president. Now, the thing is, does Putin have some responsibilities towards this? True. But the prices were already on the rise. Now,
and it's not Putin's responsibility to keep our gas prices down.
No, it's not.
What the fuck? Why are we having this conversation? Like, okay, go on.
No, the thing is, folks, and I want to share this with everyone right now. We actually have an awesome video from Case Study QB. It's about 6 minutes long, but it's from Fox News of all places. Now, here I listened to her.
You listened to me, listen to this. It was actually the other video that you were listening to me listen to, but it's all
but this is
depressingly entertaining.
This is madness and stupidity at the highest order because, again, when we look at energy here in the United States, this will be a key issue that Democratic and Republican candidates will be talking about. But I need all of you to understand that we have never once been energy independent, and this system, we've gone through this so many times, this roller coaster of the price hikes coming up and down in regards to the price of gasoline. And this is evidence on why we need to rebuild our infrastructure and rethink how we use energy. I mean, to Daniel's point, if we go up to the moon, mine the moon for...
Yeah, let's not get into moon mining.
Let's not. I meant to stop it a little bit earlier.
No, you're fine. But I do think they make a good point. And I don't really, I think that this project here that we're working on is like specifically intended to be an antidote, or not an antidote, an alternative to that framing of like, oh, well, Democrats and Republicans. It's like, I don't give a fuck, because like they're two wings of the same fucking bird that's flipping us off, man. Like, and so like, I disagree with that kind of, but I understand it as well, because that's what they do, and that's fine. Yeah. But I do think they hit on an important point, which is like they're always looking to blame someone else, because like I mean, there's lots of nefarious elements of the ruling class. There's your Bill and your Donald jumping on Jeffy's plane to go to his island for a party or whatever. You have that kind of fucking crazy shit. But then you also have like, I believe the ruling class is genuine, that they really do think that someone else is to blame and it's just a policy fix, because none of them are literate on the fucking reality, and you can throw it in their face. There was a congressman, and this was a while ago, like 2014, maybe 15 or something. I think it might have been a senator too, but he like was doing this speech on the Senate floor about some energy policy bill or whatever, and he put a chart up, and he's like, China's beating us because China's burning fossil fuels and like drilling and purchasing them from Australia or wherever and doing all this stuff. They're burning more fossil fuels and their economy is doing better. Like, you're saying that we need to burn less fossil fuels, like for your climate agenda or whatever. And I'm just, he was making the argument that like to have a healthy economy, you have to burn fossil fuels. And the motherfucker was not wrong. That's a fundamental truth.
Yeah.
Our economy depends on the consumption of non-renewable resources that just happen to be loading the atmosphere with excess carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases and fucking our future and like completely transforming every living system on the planet in due time. They're all in transition right now, and who the hell knows when it'll reach a new equilibrium. But like, I guess the point is that he was correct. And so when I do think the ruling class is genuine and they're kind of like, well, it's his problem or his problem. And some of it is just political theater and gamesmanship because they're just so fucking rich. It's just a game to them, right? Like it's not their lived reality. But anyway, that was kind of where I was thinking. What did you think about that clip?
For me, the thing that stuck out was, oh no, Putin did this, Putin did that. Well, Putin's not in charge of this fucking country. Why is one country, however big an oil producer it may be, put in a position by our leadership that they can completely dominate our energy economy, or at the very least be enough of a scapegoat that when prices for gas rise up to like $5 or $6, we can point and be like, oh, it's this country over here. Like, where were you 10 years ago when you could have been finding alternatives to this one country? Why are you just now like realizing that maybe putting all your eggs in one basket wasn't a good idea?
Right. And we never have, I think that it was the earlier clip, but it's correct. We have never been as a nation been energy independent. Right. Like there's no such thing as independency except like maybe some sectors, I guess.
Yeah.
But broadly speaking, like we have to get a mix and like we're going to get it from a bunch of different places. Maybe during World War II, we were producing everything we consumed plus enough to export or whatever. But like,
well, the idea of complete energy independence is like unhealthy for a country anyway. Like you want to be doing what you do well and then trading for everything else. Like that's just how the world works.
Is part of the infrastructure of peace.
Yeah, it stops wars. Yeah, exactly.
What did fucking that hack over at the New York Times, Thomas Friedman, always one of his books or two of his books. Actually, I think he approaches it two different times. One in Hot, Flat, and Crowded, and one in one of his other books, his earlier book in the series. I think I forget the name of it now, but yeah, he called it the McDonald's theory of, global stability or whatever. And then in the next book, he called it the Dell theory. And specifically, there was some international crisis and it was Dell computing. He thought it was great. Dell Computers is like CEO is calling like heads of state in India to be like, don't do that. It'll really fuck everything up for us and for you. And I mean, obviously, that's the amount of power that a corporation has is suspect and should be like flatly rejected as a priori a good thing for society.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to approach that kind of like economic interdependency actually creates peace because it makes, it makes it more advantageous for you to cooperate than it does for you to compete over scarce resources.
It's the modern day version of marrying off your daughter to some opposing country's prince.
To the Polish prince?
Yeah, you don't want to invade.
Like a princess?
Well, you don't want to invade them.
I just married you to somebody in Poland. Yeah. You are a princess.
Yeah, but I mean, basically the idea is just
a diplomatic token.
I'm glad I had you.
But this is the 21st century, bro. Feminism.
Yeah, it's got to be about oil now.
At any rate, yeah, I feel like one of the things, and maybe we'll talk about it after the clip there of Martinson, but like, is this a clip? Is that the next one?
That is the next one. It's where he talks about
this. One of the things that I think anybody is their feet firmly in a kind of liberatory ideology or like leftism or left of center, transformational, new ideas, however you want to describe your own personal politics, like something that's like, really, really devastatingly absent in our conversations is like just a basic understanding of energy economics and specifically the concept energy return on energy invested. Does this clip touch on that?
This will touch on that, or at least we can talk about it.
Roll the clip.
Roll that beautiful.
Thanks for prepping this.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
What if our exponentially based economic and monetary systems, rather than being the sophisticated culmination of human evolution, are really just an artifact of oil? What if all of our rich societal complexity, advanced technology, and all of our trillions of dollars of currency and debt simply are the human expression of surplus energy pumped from the ground? As a scientist, there is no doubt in my mind that we owe nearly all of our progress over the past 150 years to our discovery and use of fossil fuels. You and I, we are perfectly within our rights to wonder what will happen when, not if, but when the total net or surplus energy from oil begins to decline. What will happen to our exponential debt-based money system during this period? Is it even possible for it to function in a world without constant growth? The evidence so far says that the answer to that question is no. My opinion is that the financial instability we are now experiencing is due at least in part to the early stages of this process. Our complex monetary and associated economic systems only know growth, and they are now struggling with low growth, and the adaptation process is proving to be confusing and difficult. I can even drum up some sympathy for the various economists at the world central banks who are certainly confused by why exactly it is that their massive monetary injections have not worked as expected. These poor folks have never studied energy. They are totally unfamiliar with hard limits and have no models that include declining net energy, and therefore no way of knowing the real reason their policies are increasingly impotent.
Yeah. And so he touched on it slightly there, how you were saying that a lot of people in charge just have never really sat down and thought about it. And more importantly, it's not their job. But more importantly, have not talked to people that know these things.
Well, they have. But like I said at the very top of this, there is no political future in telling that truth.
Yeah.
Because people want to just be able to jump in their car and go to Target or whatever the fuck else they want to do with their life. They want to drive it to their lake house, or they want to, they want to have a lake house. I mean, the amount of energy that fossil fuels has provided has been fucking absolutely squandered. And I think I mentioned it in a previous video we did in the last couple of weeks about the boomers and how, I think it's a psychological thing that they literally cannot realize that, their entire existence had nothing to do with their hard work. It had nothing. They just won the energy lottery. They were alive during a time when this was available, and we were building like fucking crazy, and our empire had enough fossil fuels to go out and extract other non-fossil resources like timber or agricultural products, like plantation products, like sugar and cotton and etc. so forth, rubber, right? All of that has been because of fossil fuels. And so then I mentioned last week, I think, about Bretton Woods and Nixon and how that whole system changed, and we shifted to the petrodollar right around the time the U.S. consumption surpassed its production, or rather significantly surpassed its consumption to where it's now dependent, and OPEC had this leverage point that it's you can't pump more oil. And so we've come to this place where, many folks refer to it, I think properly, as scraping the bottom of the barrel. This is why you have things like the BP Deepwater Horizon. Did you see any introspection from Obama being like, plug the damn hole? And everybody's like, look at how serious he is. He said, damn, oh my God, a 4-letter word from such a, articulate man. But he had no intention of it. The reason that we're drilling 4 miles under fucking water to get oil is because all the easily accessible stuff is gone. This is why we're Canada's mining tar sands. And when you look at it, so when you see the Beverly Hillbillies, you ever seen that show or pilot or are familiar with it?
I'm familiar with it, yes.
Yeah, so the Beverly Hillbillies, the whole thing was they lived on a swamp, and they went out hunting, and then all of a sudden, they were being approached, in the pilot or the first couple episodes.
Yeah.
They get approached by an oil prospector, and he's like, you have this here, and it is worth a lot of money. And they buy him out, and that's why they moved to Beverly Hills. And then
you got that bubbling crude.
A setup between cultural conflict or whatever, and humor in that. But the point is that oil literally seeped out of the ground. It was the same in that one of my favorite movies, There Will Be Blood. Remember when he goes to the town? Have you seen that movie?
I've seen the scene that you recommended to me. I haven't actually gone back and watched it.
Oh, the one with the pipeline and the kid?
Yes.
Yeah, I always recommend it.
Drinking his milkshake.
Genius.
Yeah.
Anyway, my point is that the premise of that is that there's this guy, he's just like a kind of ruthless, like greedy industrial capitalist or whatever. He's like, he represents capitalism and the sociopathy of capitalism like really well. That's such a great movie. And Daniel Day-Lewis is a fucking phenomenal actor.
Oh yes.
My point is that like they literally are walking around, they're like, oh, we're hiking or hunting for hares or whatever they said to the townsfolk. They're looking for seeps because there's literally like black tarry spots at the soil surface. That's how where the oil used to be.
Right.
And now we're excavating hundreds of square miles of boreal forest and like making it a wasteland for the end of time.
And
like
digging down thousands
or
of feet.
hundreds of millions of years, that landscape will be affected by us human beings to scrape that. And so that difference can be represented in energy return on energy invested. Is there another part of this clip, or was that all we were going to watch?
No, there's another one.
I don't want to say anything that already happens.
No, that's all right if you do. We just go, yeah, we agree.
So basically, like when it first started, and there was just like Beverly Hillbillies, there's this oil coming up out of a well, like an artesian well in like a swamp, or you have There Will Be Blood, and there's just like tarry seeps coming out of the ground. We were getting so we would put in 1 unit of energy in terms of human power, muscle power, horsepower, right? Literally horses moving stuff around, stuff like that. We'd put in 1 unit of energy and get 100 units out.
Right.
100 to 1 was our ratio when we first started exploiting oil. Remember, like Quaker State? That should happen in Standard Oil and all that stuff, the Gilded Age. All that was happening on the East Coast and then on the West Coast later. A lot of those fields are still pumping oil, just very slowly. I mean, you go to a major city like Long Beach, and you're like walking downtown between your boutique brew pubs, and like it's just like a fucking oil well, like fenced off and just like pumping in the middle of the city.
Yeah,
whatever.
They hide them too.
And so like, and so we were getting 100 to 1, and now we're closer to like 45 or 50 to 1, I think. Which is interesting because I read an anthropology paper a couple years back, and it was a study of the Kung, I think is how you pronounce their name, but like they're the Kalahari Desert, I think, indigenous folks that still largely live like a territorial, like nomadism kind of thing. They have a territory that they rotate through during the seasons and harvest and hunt and gather and all that shit. I read a paper that looked at the energetics of that, and while gathering gives you about 3 to 1, hunting gives you 40 to 1.
So we're almost back to just be hunter-gatherers.
I mean, for what we're putting, but the energy can do a lot of other things where a hunt is just for food. But I'm saying is that like we can still get a good energy return on energy invested if we restructure society, which is like, I could talk about for 1,000 years, probably. And this is what
I'm
pursuing. Right. Like we could design systems that provided everything we need and a surplus is what I'm saying.
Right.
But instead we're using that to add another lane to a freeway that's never going to alleviate traffic.
Or building more and more tall buildings in order to satisfy the egos of a few.
Exactly.
It's interesting that you mentioned
shopping centers or whatever.
Right. It's interesting that you mentioned, the wells that are just kind of, limping along, slowly pumping. And I was watching a video where, like, I think it was Russian oil scientists were like trying to push a narrative of regenerative oil, basically, where like oil could be made by a non-biological process deep within the earth, and then that oil welled upwards. Because they would pump something, and then they'd come back just like out of curiosity, like 10, 20 years later, and try to pump it again, and they'd get more. And it's like, well, if you know anything about how oil works, it's in basically porous rock, but it's not porous like foam, it's porous like sandstone. So like, you give it some time, it's going to infiltrate further, and of course you're going to be able to get a little bit more out of that well. But they were like, no, it's created inside the earth, and we can just keep doing this forever. And it's like, this is not the narrative that we need right now,
Yeah, the abiotic oil theory is just absolute horseshit because, like,
Yeah.
where is that carbon source?
Yeah.
As far as we know, like, the primary carbon source on planet Earth is photosynthesis.
Well, and it's not just carbon is the thing. It's like carbohydrates and hydrocarbons. And so, like,
Yeah, that's what I mean.
as far
Yeah.
like those can be made. Like we have found them elsewhere in our solar system, and so we suspect that they're being made abiotically. But at the same time, that would then mean that at some point in the Earth's history, it was abiotically made, plunged down into the Earth, heated, turned into oil, and is just now seeping up. But again, that is not going to be there forever. Sure, every 10 years you might be able to, get enough oil to operate for like a year, but that math doesn't add up.
Right, and even if it naturally replenished, which I don't think it does,
No.
I don't think there's enough evidence to support that.
No.
Even if we can see that happening elsewhere, like what are the conditions on those planets?
Mm-hmm.
Intense pressure, intense temperatures, all sorts of other factors that would affect the chemistry there. But like, even if that was the case, it's not like sunshine that just is when the planet turns and your particular patch of ground receives solar radiation, there's energy there, right? Like that you can capture in plants, or I guess in a solar panel. But realistically speaking, like, it still does not support this kind of endless growth, which is what Martin.
That is what we'll get into. That is what we'll get into. And so I think maybe we should go to the clip then.
Perfect.
Say too much.
Yeah, and everybody needs to watch Chris Martinson's crash course. It's free on YouTube. He was saying this shit. I think he did the original crash course in 2011, and then, or maybe it might have been a little earlier. And then he did like a 2014 update. I think was the last time he updated it. His channel's pretty good. Like, he's kind of like, he's had to kind of go off of YouTube and largely uses like subscribers to his website and stuff because YouTube suppresses the stuff he wants to talk about. Is especially since COVID and his kind of look at COVID science and offering some kind of mediation or alternative narrative to like this crazy fucking, this crazy like one-sided, it's only one way, and how dare you ever question it, and if you question it, we'll call you a kook and we'll silence you, etc.
Deplatform you,
deplatform you. So anyway, everybody should check his shit out, and let's roll that clip. Let's talk about whatever we're talking about.
Roll it.
Well, here's how it all sums up. There are some knowns. We know that energy is required for both growth and complexity. We know that surplus energy is shrinking. We know that the age of cheap oil is over. And we know that because of this, oil costs will consume an ever greater proportion of our total budget. And with these knowns come along some specific risks. There is the risk that our exponential money system will cease to operate in a world of declining energy surpluses. It is designed for a world without limits, a world of endless growth. And there is the risk that our society will be forced to become less complex, a loaded statement if ever there was one. And finally, there is the risk that even as oil winds down, the momentum of the money system will create conditions ripe for hyperinflation. Each one of these known facts adds to each one of these stated risks, and that is what this course is about, assessing those risks and then deciding what, if anything, a prudent adult should do about adapting to those realities and facing these risks. When I put all of this together, I feel comfortable making the following predictions. Remember, I reserve the right to change these with the arrival of new information at a later date. Number 1, the status quo will be preserved at all costs. Politicians will hide the truth, economic statistics will become even fuzzier, and central banks will continue to throw more and more money at a system that at its core is out of tune with reality. Number 2, given the likely responses by those in power, the most likely eventual result will be hyperinflation. The price of anything is a function of how many dollars are floating around matched against how much of that product or good happens to be available. Because literally every single failed fiat currency regime has failed for the same reasons, we can reasonably expect that the future will be filled with ever more dollars. And at the same time, declining surplus energy will assure that there are fewer goods floating around. Together, these spell inflation. Number 3, standards of living will decline. This is the logical product of number 1 and number 2. However, I am living proof that even as one's standard of living declines, one's quality of life can go up. So this is not a story with a certain and tragic ending, it's a story of change. For those who can see the changes coming and position themselves for it, I am convinced that a fulfilling, enjoyable, and prosperous life awaits. Yes, it is entirely possible that the issues I have raised here will play out over many years or even decades, and almost certainly will be influenced by changes in behavior and technology. But the main point cannot be denied. At the present moment, we are squandering precious time and remaining energy in a desperate, certainly foolish, and possibly ultimately unpleasant bid to preserve the status quo. We are attempting to sustain the unsustainable. And on that note, we're almost through. Next, we will tie the first two.
So he does the 3 E's: economy, energy, and
environment
or ecosystem. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so like, and he really kind of really focuses on the currency stuff and the banking stuff. That's what Peak Prosperity kind of came out of. And his partner, Adam Taggart, who now has his own show, is financial analyst. I think Chris Martenson left medicine to also become some kind of like financial analyst for Barclays or some other big, firm that deals in that stuff. And so like they come from a kind of economic side and a Federal Reserve like currency policy side and all that stuff. And so he dedicates a lot of time to that in the crash course, but it's really critical to understand what were the 3 things he said. Like, I don't know if you could bring him back. Basically, like, the phrase we're trying to sustain unfold, like
You're breaking up really bad right now. Yeah.
I'm gonna say something cool. I'm just kidding.
It's really bad. I liked. I'll try to cover for you for a minute. I liked his subtle dig where he asked what actions a prudent adult might take. Yeah. But I mean, honestly, yeah, it's like, what would someone who is actually thinking long term about their future do, as opposed to what is someone who is trying to, appease shareholders or make it so that his constituents don't hang him or something along those lines. And that's a great question because, like, oh, wow, you're gone for good. There we go. That's a great question because as we were saying earlier, like standards, and he was saying is standards of living are going to go down substantially. And when they do, you're going to have a lot of pissed off people looking for answers. And right now, it doesn't look like our politicians are actually working on, one, preventing that, and two, even like taking the time to come up with answers. I lost Steve for now, but I'll keep on going. Another point that I really liked is that he said that I reserve the right to change his opinions if I'm presented with other data. What a great statement that you don't hear a whole lot of people saying. Basically, not I'm married to these ideas because I said them and now I have to stick with them. No, he's just more along the lines of like, this is what I think right now. If you tell me more, and share different data with me, I can change these opinions, because they are just that. They're just opinions based upon the current facts. That's a very, again, adult way of thinking that is refreshing. You don't hear that very often when it comes to political discourse. And so it is a good thing to hear that. We don't quite have Steve back yet, but he showed up. He's got to choose a video source. Yeah, but standards of living declining. I think that's going to be a very bad time in America. We already don't get along with each other in the best of times. And I hate to imagine what's going to happen when it's no longer the best of times. You can imagine, I would think that there's going to be a whole lot of blame being flung around, and you'll have people fighting one another. And of course, you'll have the wealthy and the powerful, more than happy to point the finger at one group or another and say it's their fault. this wouldn't be happening if they weren't around or if they hadn't have done this. Hopefully we can all not fall for that. And you remember the old adage that if someone's pointing a finger at you, they have 3 fingers pointing back. Also, if you want to avoid that accusation, point like this. Uh, I do recommend. Had a recommended video that I put in the links down below the video for a video by ASAP Science where they talk about the biggest lies in renewable energy. As you may have caught on from watching these videos, I tend to have a bit more hope when it comes to technological solutions. Currently, we're relying upon stored energy. Oh, and Steve says he's not coming back. His internet went down completely. So I'll finish this thought and then I'll let y'all go. But currently, we are relying on stored solar power in the form of fossil fuels and coal and the like. And prior to that, we had just used wood, which is, again, nothing more than stored solar energy. And right now, we're cutting out the middleman of storing it over millions of years, and we're going for directly harnessing solar energy. And I'd like to think that, if you got 25% are efficient solar panels, that it's very possible that you can substitute those wherever possible in industry, and maybe even help to or make the transition for a lot of people from oil over to electric vehicles. That's not going to be possible for everyone just due to shortages in the range of electric vehicles. A lot of people that live far away from cities have to drive 100 or more miles to get to some major service they might need, like a hospital or something like that. And so the idea of having a range of anything less than several hundred miles is just not going to work for them. Let's see. I don't think I have much more to talk about, so I'll have to cover Steve's portion of it and say that when the American experiment ends, and I can't remember it now. Oh, darn it, I fucked it up. But it'll end with thunderous applause. Anyway, y'all have a good one. Goodbye.